Deadpool and Wolverine is unique. This is a film about
commencement. The end of one thing, the start of something new.
For anyone who doesn't follow movie studio news, Deadpool and Wolverine is a product of Disney's acquisition of 20th Century Fox in 2019, as predicted by The Simpsons back in 1998. 20th Century Fox helped kick off the boom in superhero movies that we are still enjoying today, with the release of X-Men in 2000, Daredevil in 2003, and Fantastic Four in 2005. These movies, along with New Line Cinema's Blade, Sony's Spider-Man, and Universal's Hulk, showed Marvel the potential their comic book characters had on the big screen, leading them to form their own production company, Marvel Studios, launch their own interconnected Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, start making films with the characters they still owned the rights to, and ultimately become part of Disney. By acquiring Fox, Disney and Marvel regained the rights to all the characters that Fox had previously made films about, bringing that era of comic book movies to an end, and enabling them to kick off a new era for these characters as part of their cinematic universe. All of this means that Deadpool and Wolverine effectively functions, preposterously, as a sequel to 11 X-Men movies, 2 Deadpool movies, 33 MCU movies, and an array of TV shows. With that in mind, this movie had a lot to accomplish, and amazingly, it succeeds at most of it. It had to feel like both a Fox X-Men film and a Disney Marvel film. It had to have the same tone, look, and structure as the first 2 Deadpool films to function as a sequel to them, despite now having an infinitely higher budget. And it had to be a good enough Wolverine film to justify bringing huge jacked man out of retirement, after what was previously intended to be his stellar final performance as the character in 2019's Logan. If you haven't seen Logan, you might want to skip ahead 10 seconds, as there will be spoilers for that film imminently. Deadpool and Wolverine opens, wisely, with Deadpool digging up Wolverine's bones from his final resting place at the end of Logan, before using them as weapons in a mad fight scene. As well as being a fittingly crass joke for a Deadpool film, the scene serves to immediately reassure the audience that the filmmakers understand how great an ending Logan was for the character of Wolverine, and they are not going to do anything to undermine or retcon it. This opening scene is set to NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye, and I'm embarrassed to admit that it took me a whole day of having the song stuck in my head to realise that it was a sneaky reference to this scene in X-Men 2, and also subtly foreshadows the return of Aaron Stanford's Pyro in this movie. I definitely should have picked up on this sooner, because as a film fan born in the early 90s, I grew up with the X-Men films, and X2, well.
It's one of my favourites.
To say goodbye to all the Marvel franchises previously owned by Fox, this film is jam-packed with gratuitous cameos. While this does arguably prove Martin Scorsese's famous criticism that Marvel movies are more like theme park rides than actual cinema, with audiences pointing at things they recognise rather than engaging with a meaningful story, the filmmakers actually managed to give most of these returning characters something to do, to justify having them around. The cameo in the end credits scene being a particular highlight. So, the cameos. This is where I'm going to get into spoiler territory. If you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine yet, and don't want to be spoiled going into it, skip ahead to the timecode on screen now. Deadpool and Wolverine spend a large chunk of the film trapped in the void, a cosmic dump where characters who deviate from the MCU's core continuity are sent to rot. This is a brilliantly meta use of the void, which was first introduced in the Disney Plus series Loki, giving our heroes a chance to team up with a cast of almost forgotten characters from fallen franchises, who would otherwise never get a proper ending now that the rights to their stories have reverted to Marvel and Disney. In this lineup, Jennifer Garner is particularly impressive, reprising her role as Elektra from 2003's Daredevil, and her own spin-off movie Elektra in 2005. She got into phenomenal superhero shape for this film, kicks ass in a memorable fight scene, and slips effortlessly back into a character that she hasn't touched in 19 years. Given that her Daredevil movie received mixed reviews, and has been massively overshadowed by the infinitely better Disney Netflix version years later, and the Elektra spin-off movie was a failure both critically and commercially, Garner is a brilliant sport going to this much effort to do justice to the character. To her credit, she was never the problem in those underwhelming films. Next, you have Wesley Snipes' Blade, the man who popularised black leather in blockbusters 1 year before even The Matrix did it. This is the only cameo that genuinely surprised me, which brought a real smile to my face in the cinema.
We're honoured by your presence.
Even though for some reason he appears without his iconic sword. Blade, Spider-Man and the X-Men were a holy trinity at the turn of the millennium that really ushered in the superhero movie revolution. And while the other two are probably more popular, it has to be noted that Blade was the first one to hit the big screen in 1998, so it's extremely fitting to see him back as part of this lineup. He also has a great one-liner about how there's only ever going to be one Blade, and given that his Replacements movie has been stuck in development hell for years now, that line might prove more accurate than the writers intended, at least for now. The next character to join this ragtag team of oft-forgotten heroes is Channing Tatum's Gambit. I love that he is here. For anyone listening who isn't aware of the context behind his appearance, Channing Tatum had been trying to persuade Fox to make a Gambit movie with him as the lead for years, maybe even longer than Ryan Reynolds spent persuading them to make a Deadpool movie starring him. But while Reynolds eventually got his Deadpool film made, Tatum's Gambit movie never quite materialised, and fell through completely when Disney purchased Fox. The character acknowledges this with a great joke about wondering if he was born in the void, and you can see how much fun Tatum is having every second that he's on screen, finally living his dream role. I love that the writers went ahead and put in such an elaborate joke that only nerds who follow film news will fully understand. And who knows, after the fan response to this character, maybe we'll see him again in a future project after all. The final character Deadpool recruits to his team is Daphne Keene's Laura, also known as X-23 from Logan. Daphne Keene's performance in Logan was incredible, especially when you consider that she was only 11 years old at the time, and she was an essential part of Wolverine's previous final adventure and character arc. It makes perfect sense to bring her back here, with her fulfilling a similar, albeit more rushed, function in this film, as she once again inspires Wolverine to keep fighting and strive to be a hero. Like the others, she does a great job with the limited screen time she has. However, there is one aspect of her appearance that demonstrates one of the few problems I have with this movie. Namely, the marketing. Disney went so heavy on the marketing for this film, even by Deadpool's over-the-top standards, that by the time I saw it in the cinema, they'd released so much footage that I felt like I'd seen it before. Almost every scene features in a trailer, and the appearance of Daphne Keene as Laura was ultimately spoiled by the final trailer. Supposedly, the reason for this was because Daphne Keene wanted to attend the film's premiere, and someone at the studio thought her attendance would make it obvious that she was in the film, and therefore decided they should put her in the final trailer to control how that information would get out. I have to say, what a bad decision that was. The average moviegoer probably doesn't know, and definitely doesn't care, who attends a film's premiere. So in my opinion, they should have kept her out of the trailer instead of releasing yet another spoiler. One big reveal that mercifully was not spoiled by the marketing was Hugh Jackman finally wearing Wolverine's iconic, comic book accurate mask after 25 years playing this character, and frankly, they nailed it. While Hugh Jackman spends most of the film in the iconic yellow suit, he doesn't don the mask until the final big fight of the film. This was a great decision. I've personally never minded that he never wore the mask in any of his big screen appearances, because it would cover so much of his face that it would stop Hugh Jackman emoting. The man is a great actor, and this character has been part of him for so long that he can now tell Wolverine's entire life story just using his face. It would be a mistake to hinder his performance by covering all of that up. Using the mask for one climactic fight scene is exciting, fresh, and cathartic, without tarnishing the actor's performance. A couple of nitpicks about this, though. Having his face covered clearly made it easier to replace Hugh Jackman with a CG double for parts of the fight, so the VFX artists seem to have gotten a bit carried away with the digital double and included this hideous shot where Wolverine looks like a video game character. My other nitpick is Wolverine's gratuitous shirtless scene. This is clearly intended to show off the extraordinary shape that Hugh Jackman continues to get himself into for this role, even at the age of 55. But with that mask covering his face, that could be anyone's body. I'm sure it is him, but the mask made me question it, as it does make it too easy to throw in a body double, a stuntman, or even the digital double again. Okay, marketing criticisms aside, there are a few minor complaints I have about the film itself. The villains were mostly good, but Cassandra Nova's powers were poorly defined, so I struggled to gauge what sort of threat she was supposed to pose, and I couldn't understand why she appeared to be able to survive absolutely anything. She can use telepathy on people, but only if she's touching them. Fine. She has telekinesis powerful enough to rival Jean Grey or the Scarlet Witch. Okay, but being so overpowered makes it hard to believe the heroes could ever win a fight with her. And then this is where they really lost me. She appears to either be invulnerable or have a healing factor like Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm sure there's a moment where Wolverine stabs her and it has no effect on her. The next issue is Juggernaut. It seems a shame to cast a random actor in this role when we've already had two good Juggernauts. Deadpool does at least address this with a joke about this being the Juggernaut of the week, which arguably helps maintain the low-budget feel of the first Deadpool film. But given that this is not a low-budget movie, I'm really surprised that they couldn't persuade Vinnie Jones to come back and reprise the role. Then there's the Deadpool Corps. Watching Deadpool and Wolverine violently slash their way through an army of mostly immortal Deadpools is fun, and I'm pretty sure Ryan Reynolds' whole family appears amongst the Deadpools, which is lovely. But this scene doesn't make much sense from a narrative perspective. Deadpool is a wild card who does whatever he wants and whatever he thinks is the right thing to do, answering to no one. So how come there are endless versions of him who are apparently happy to blindly work for the villains of the film and help them end a universe? Surely they would either side with our own Deadpool and turn on their masters, or just not turn up in the first place when called upon. Having them as Cassandra Nova's monkey butlers just doesn't feel right. This next complaint might just be me, so if you listen to it and shrug thinking, who cares, I completely understand. But personally, I didn't like the fact that despite featuring two immortal heroes who can heal from anything, the film doesn't feature a single shot of a wound rapidly healing itself. Personally, I've always found these visual effects really cool to watch, and I always look forward to them in a film starring Wolverine or Deadpool. The film is also just a little bit ugly. Maybe it's because so much of it is set in the void, but there's a slightly grey look to a lot of the film, where it feels like it could do with more dynamic lighting and a broader colour palette. Finally, given that this film may well be saying goodbye to the entire Fox X-Men series, I'm surprised that we didn't get any other actual X-Men in the film besides Wolverine. Cyclops in particular is getting a lot more appreciation from fans these days, thanks to his excellent portrayal in X-Men 97, and his rivalry with Wolverine could have been a fun thing to bring back here. That said, I have no doubt that somewhere within Disney, a team is currently plotting how to bring him back bigger and better than ever in a future MCU X-Men film, so we'll see him again eventually, although sadly probably without the eternally underutilised James Marsden in the role. A few other thoughts, not complaints but worth mentioning. There's a montage of cameos from alternate versions of Wolverine, when Deadpool is looking to recruit one of them. As fun as these are, I can't help but think if they were going to include the Henry Cavill one, it would have been fun to include some of the other actors that have been fan cast as the next Wolverine too, or even the actors who were offered the role before Hugh Jackman. Actors such as Dougray Scott, Russell Crowe, Taron Egerton, or the one I'd personally most like to see, Daniel Radcliffe. My compliments to director Sean Levy and Ryan Reynolds. The first Deadpool movie was a grungy, relatively low-budget underdog that Ryan Reynolds had to fight the studio to let him make. Managing to make this movie feel even remotely like that first one, now that it's part of the Disney money-printing machine, is a real achievement. I also want to compliment the music choices in this film. I love old music, and rarely listen to anything that's less than 25 years old. And I always enjoy when a modern film manages to make a classic song work in what should be an incongruous setting. So well done for turning Madonna's Like a Prayer into an action soundtrack. It works tremendously. Finally, I like how the film weaves in the MCU's trademark intertextuality, particularly by using settings, characters and concepts from the Loki series, but not in such a way that audience members who haven't seen that show can't follow what's going on. In summary, this film is a rare beast, a sequel to at least 46 other films by my count, a loving tribute to Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and the many films that laid the groundwork for the superhero cinema boom, and overall a lot of fun. It's crazy to think that we've reached a point where there are enough of these films for something this meta to even exist in the first place, let alone be good. It's a thumbs up from me. This has been my first online review and video essay, but I'm hoping to do a lot more, so if you enjoyed it, please let me know by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and keeping an eye out for my next video. If you have any thoughts about the movie that you'd like to share with me and anyone else watching this, please drop something down in the comments, whether you agree with my thoughts, disagree, or want to call out an interesting point that I missed. Because ultimately, you will have your own relationship with this movie. I am just a third reel.